Welcome to Lansing Online News Radio with Bonnie and Bill. This is LCC Radio, WLNZ 89.7 here in Lansing, Michigan. It's going to be a busy evening tonight. We're going to talk a little bit about Michigan politics. Well, actually, we're going to talk quite a bit about Michigan politics. And then we're going to segue into this month. We have been showcasing Autism Month, and we'll be talking about a peer-to-peer counseling program that's available in the area. So we'll move into that. But Bill, first, do you have any announcements?
Well, there's a few things that we talked about before, but I'll go over them quickly. The fundraiser for the Herman House, at the Herman House by the Historical Society is next Tuesday.
Not tomorrow, but a week from?
Week from Tuesday,
All
6
right.
p.m. Also, Liz Homer is going to unveil her book tomorrow night.
That is Patriots? No, what is
Pioneers,
it?
Reformers, and Millionaires.
Ah, that's it.
Yes, it's about a very fascinating family in Lansing that were one of the founders. It goes back into the early 1800s. And then finally, this weekend there is two major authors coming in town. Chelsea Handler, who a few people might recognize that name.
Who may still get the Late Show in one of the networks, or maybe not.
I'm not sure.
They're going to go for all white guys?
Probably.
Apparently. All right.
But her new book is Uganda Gotta Be Kidding Me.
Yes.
And it is about a tour that she took a bunch of her friends on. One was an African safari, which did not necessarily go well. And then also face to face with her at the other Schulers is Christopher Moore, who is a comedic fantasy writer, written about 13 books. He is funny.
Oh.
Much funnier than Chelsea Handler.
Really? She'll be thrilled to hear that.
She won't be thrilled to read the article I wrote about it.
Oh, really?
I think her most recent book has lots of tinges of racism in it.
That was a concern, wasn't it?
They're pretty obvious.
Well, isn't Uganda the country that has, shall we say, a problematic relationship with human rights? And
yes, that's true.
That
would be the least of her statements, yeah.
Mm.
So, and they're not veiled at all.
Well, that's in keeping with what's been happening the last few.
That's what I thought.
Yeah. Between Mr. Don Sterling of the Clippers out in Los Angeles and the Bundy Ranch incident. I suggested that Sterling ought to move to Bundy Ranch. It seems like that
you could take the team there.
He might have
I saw just a short thing on the web that Irvin Johnson might be making a pitch to buy the Clippers.
He could probably do it at a petty cash. Irvin's been doing quite well.
Yes,
I mean, he would be a logical candidate, I would think.
Right.
If I were Sterling, I would be eager to jettison it and get out of the public eye.
And before they come to him and say, let's sell.
Well, I don't know that they can pressure him to do so. One of the oddest things I learned was that the NBA owner rules are secret, so we don't really know how much power the other owners have. And I think it would be also a bit naive to suggest that all of the other owners are enlightened.
Yeah.
And we have only one problem. I suspect if you looked closely at a few, usually once you get into that billionaire category, you're allowed to be as eccentric or squirrely as you care to be.
And he's both of those.
Yes, he certainly is. So any more announcements?
No, that's a busy week.
Busy week, I guess, yeah.
I probably won't be going to see Chelsea, but...
Apparently not now.
No. Well, that might be worth it.
Will she see your article before she appears?
I hope not. No.
It's coming out.
And of course, it depends on how much it's toned down. But I noticed things. I mean, it was really obvious, when you say Mount a Negro. I mean, that's kind of.
I don't know.
Why are you going to Africa? Because I want to learn where rappers get their names. I mean, some of that stuff probably works in stand-up comedy.
In a club when everybody's drunk.
Yeah, in context.
Yeah.
But not necessarily when it makes it into literature.
I think that people's feelings are particularly raw nowadays, too, as a result of some of these more visible incidents the last few weeks. I think we're a little tired of anything that people either try to say you're misconstruing me or that it was just meant to be funny.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's a different era now. Before I forget, I want to tell you, though, that I wanted you to talk a little bit about your poem a day, because we've forgotten to tell people that now how many there are up already? 27 as of today, right?
Yeah. What day is it? Day 27.
Bill's been posting one a day, and he's had some creative things. People want all sorts of strange spacing on poems.
Generally, it went very well this year. I think this is our 4th year.
Yeah, it is.
And the poems are incredibly creative, come from a variety of sources. Most of the poems are from what I would call a professional poet. Yeah. So they wouldn't be like somebody like me. They're well done. They're charming. They're hard hitting. You can read them one after another on Lansing Online News. And I think what we'll try to do maybe is put together one link to all of them because I named them all day, so we can do that this
Yes,
year
yeah.
instead of trying to be clever. So you'll be able to find them easily.
And the other thing I noted was that many of them came from the walls of Morrill Hall,
Right.
where you and I toured it just before they tore it down.
I've used some of the art from there, right? Morrill Hall, what was that, 3 years ago now or 2 years ago? 2 years ago. Um, the English department and some associated students spent a night in there writing literary graffiti on every square inch of the walls that they could find.
Yeah,
And it was fascinating.
it was a strange experience to
It
walk
was.
through that deserted place
And you
with the
shot some
strange
great
noises
video.
of an empty building that had been empty for a while. And you would see all these poems written on the walls. And we went there with Stephanie Glazier, who was then with the MSU Center for Poetry, and she wrote one on the wall while we
Right.
were there. And it was
And
really moving.
you videotaped it.
Yeah, it was an interesting experience.
It
wasn't
was. And it was ephemera because a couple weeks later it was gone.
Right. So the record that you and I made was really the only record
Right.
there ever was.
There's a photographic and a videographic record of it. It's
Yeah.
kind of interesting.
The moving finger moves on.
It
Yes,
was,
it does.
it was fascinating. I'm going to put one up tomorrow just as a graphic from Diane Wachowski. It was a really funny one.
Oh, great, great. Cool. Yeah, wonderful. Well, I would like to shift gears now and introduce our two guests. I'm going to have them cozy up for the webcam.
Cozy up.
You can visit LansingOnlineNews.com and you can see the webcast that goes out at the same time. The webcast is then archived on our website and it also goes up on YouTube. So we try to do everything we can to get all of this stuff archived because tonight we're going to be looking forward to the upcoming elections this November. And boy, I know midterm elections are supposed to be dull. I'm not sure this one's going to be dull. It looks like there's a lot going on in Michigan as relates to the midterm elections. We were joined by Jonathon Oosting from M Live, and we're also joined by Susan Demas, and it is Inside Michigan Politics. And I'm interested, Susan, you take a political look at this. What is the biggest contended issue you think there might be some clarity by the time we get to November?
Well, I think especially in Michigan, the issue is always the economy. There's still relatively high unemployment. There is a lot of uncertainty. I think we've seen some gains in our business climate, but there's still a lot of apprehension. And, it has been quite a few years since the Great Recession hit, but there's always the concern that the next one could be around the corner.
Well, we saw today that Highland Park may get an emergency manager. It's now in enough difficulty that apparently the governor is looking at doing that. So that doesn't bode well for the future of the state if we're seeing more and more places go under emergency management. Is that going to be an issue in this upcoming election? Because the last time the voters had a chance to vote, they decided they didn't like that emergency manager law, but they kind of got it back pretty quickly. Are they going to hold that and other things against the governor?
It will be interesting because I think so much of that issue is wrapped up in the city of Detroit. And, that is an open question at this point. There have certainly been a lot of negotiations, but we don't have a final deal in place. We don't know what the legislature plans to do there. And so it remains to be seen if Detroit is going to be a victory point for Governor Snyder in particular, or if this gets bogged down in the morass. And I think that is really where the emergency manager verdict will be, at least for November.
Well, we see that Speaker of the House, Jace Bolger, excuse me, kind of threw a monkey wrench in the governor's plans to get the bailout package for Detroit behind him as soon as possible. But now Jace Bolger is saying that unless the unions kick in money, that plan is a non-starter. Is that, Jonathan, you cover the legislature, is that still going to be, the Capitol, is that still going to be a big issue? Are they working that out behind the scenes? What's happening?
Certainly there. Kevin Orr, the emergency manager, is actually going to be in town tomorrow and Wednesday, meeting with Jace Bolger, Randy Richardville, the Detroit delegation, other lawmakers, kind of explaining to them where the process is and talking to them about the latest plan of adjustment. And I would guess probably trying to twist a few arms for cooperation.
Is this mostly about twisting arms? Because they really don't have authority in a bankruptcy case, do they?
Well, I don't know if he can twist arms, but he, Well, a lot of the bankruptcy negotiations are actually done behind closed doors, and they're confidential. So this agreement reached today. We actually don't know the exact details of what that agreement
Oh,
is.
they did.
Maybe it includes money from unions, which Jace Bulger says he's been asking for months. I doubt it, but we don't actually know. So it's hard to say exactly what they'll be talking about.
How would it be to the advantage of the unionists to kick in at this point?
Well, if Jace Bulger won't hold the vote until they do so, I guess that would be
I mean,
leverage,
can
certainly, from
they?
his perspective.
I don't see how they could cave that quickly and say, "Oh yes, this would be fine," since we've been kicked in the teeth so routinely here in a right-to-work state now. We can hardly wait to throw more money on the table. I mean, that doesn't seem to make sense to me. It's the
Well, I mean, you do have obviously retirees themselves are taking quite a haircut with
Yeah.
any sort of pension deal. I mean, what was on the table up to this point was certainly not as punitive as what a lot of the bondholders wanted, but cuts are going to be had by union members, and so throwing in this last wrinkle about the unions themselves kicking in more on top of it, I think some people, even those in the legislature, weren't really prepared for that.
It did seem a surprise.
Yeah, Randy Richardville certainly seemed surprised about it. Jace Bulger's counterpart in the upper chamber. Governor Snyder acknowledged, it makes things more challenging. He's, not the strongest worded politician. He didn't come out and criticize Jace Bulger or anything like that. But he, acknowledged that it makes things much tougher moving forward.
What happens if the unions balk?
Well, we'll see if Jace Bulger holds to it. I mean, I imagine he would. He went out and made this public
And then
statement.
the deal
So.
goes down, and then what happens?
Well, there will be blaming on both sides. Jace Bulger will say, "I've always been asking unions for this. They chose not to go with this settlement," and obviously the unions will say, "Well, this was never actually part of the agreement. He threw it in at the last moment." And it's
Without a
his fault.
settlement, though, then where do we end up? I don't think.
That's
I
an
mean, it's
excellent
uncharted
question.
territory, isn't it?
Well, that's the big question, right? The unions don't want to, union members, retired pension members, don't want to ratify this agreement unless they know the state is kicking
Yeah.
in the money. And the state doesn't want to, Jace Bulger is apparently mad that the union is demanding this, so he's asking unions to contribute. So it is something of a holding pattern. And, if nothing gives, I imagine it would be bad news for everybody.
Well, we do have this situation of an election year, and
Yeah.
with people being asked in the legislature, which is Republican controlled, to vote for what can very easily be categorized as a 300,
Yes.
odd, bailout for the city of Detroit, which is not popular out
No,
of state.
no.
And so, perhaps this is a matter of politics, and Jace Bulger knows the votes aren't there, so you may as well cast the blame on unions when this thing goes down.
That seems fairly shrewd. I think that seems like a realistic strategy. Where does that end up then, though? I mean, isn't that sort of a zero-sum game at the end of the day? I mean, you still have to deal with the problem of Detroit.
You do, and obviously it's not just the city of Detroit. If there is no settlement agreement, Oakland County, surrounding communities are all going to be impacted by this, both in terms of their bond rating, their ability to attract business. So, it's in everybody's interest to forge some sort of a deal, however painful it is for all sides.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. It's very interesting. I mean, it seems to me that it still remains a surprise that the unions took the path that they did in this state. And I just can't imagine them willingly walking to the table and saying, "Here's some more cash." Maybe they will. I don't know. What do you think, Bill?
Well, I think there's a point where they don't have any other choice. I mean, this is going to get pretty ugly. They are not that powerful anymore.
Ooh, ouch. So
I mean,
this is a sign of their weakness as well.
I think so.
No?
And that's what he's pushing right now.
Ooh, going to be interesting. What else is going to be a determinant in the governor's race? What do you think people are looking for out of Governor Snyder to make up their mind?
Well, for Snyder, I think most people know who Snyder is at this point. The bigger issue is Mark Schauer introducing himself to voters.
You think so?
He's certainly getting his name out there. The DGA ads helped with that, but polls still show a lot of people don't actually know who Mark Schauer is. People have a very good idea who Rick Snyder is after 4 years, and his approval ratings aren't as high as an incumbent would want them to be, but they're at about the same level that Jennifer Granholm's were 8 years ago when she won re-election.
Obviously, incumbency has huge advantages, but Schauer, it seems, has not really sort of carved a name for himself yet. I mean, I don't think as many voters. He hasn't had the kind of spectacular campaign, in my mind, that has attracted excitement and interest on the part of the voters yet. Is that part of a strategy to save your money until later, so that since he may not have as much, to try to save it for the fall? You figure?
It may be a strategy. I don't think we know, or it could be the sign of troubles in the campaign. I mean, one thing that is kind of without doubt is that Mark Schauer is not going to have the money that Rick Snyder will.
Right.
Both raised by campaigns and all the outside money from the DGA, RGA, unions, business groups, so on and so forth. And so you might expect Mark Schauer to hoard some of the money towards the end when it may make more of a difference when people are paying attention out of necessity.
Right, right. Yeah,
Certainly.
if he had it, he probably would spend it.
Yeah, well, he's accepted public financing, so he's actually limited to spending
that's
$2
right,
million
yeah.
through the primary season. So we'll see if the DGA goes back on the air for him. I mean, they did come out very early running ads for him, and saw a bump in the polls. You know, it worked, I guess. RGA has been on the air for a long time now for Rick Snyder. I don't know if we've seen the same jump in the polls there. I think the RGA ads are interesting because they feature Mark Schauer and they say his name a lot, and the guy with bad name recognition.
You gotta wonder about that.
It's an unusual
helping a
ad.
little bit.
You know, connection,
Sure.
That's one of the disadvantages of independent spending. I'm sure Rick Snyder's campaign wasn't so thrilled about it, but they're not supposed to coordinate. So.
Right.
Mhm, sure. And of course, the ad came out a couple weeks ago with the nursing home tax that actually Governor Engler voted for, and Rick Snyder voted to extend, and they blamed Mark Schauer for it. So it was an embarrassing.
This is
fiasco.
LCC Radio, WLNZ, here in Lansing, Michigan.
What makes Schauer an outstanding candidate? And I'm saying, I'm asking that as a question, sort of, what do you think
What are his
he
strong
can do,
points?
he can do
Mhm.
to make himself look better right now?
Well, I've covered Mark Schauer for about as long as I've been in Michigan. It's coming up on 10 years, and he is a fantastic retail politician. And I think that's why he had a lot of success at the state legislative level, and that very much helped him with his congressional run. But it's a lot more difficult to translate that into a statewide race for governor. TV ads are far more effective. So, he's still good when he's working a room, but there are a whole lot more rooms to work.
Sure. Yeah, I didn't cover Schauer when he was in the state legislature and only followed remotely his congressional races. But you and I were both at Bill Clinton's speech at the Democratic Jeff Jack dinner last night, and Mark Schauer came out and delivered a pretty rousing speech. I mean,
Did he?
It was gubernatorial or gubernatorial campaign material. It was something that I hadn't seen before from him, just covering him, at smaller events, and he can certainly, as you mentioned, play a room very well.
Well, he was a community organizer too, so
Yes.
that might help him. He
Seems a lot of people were longing for Gretchen Whitmer in one role or another, and the fact that she's not apparently willing to run for anything, and I mean, we're seeing that in the 8th congressional race as well. We saw Barb Byram step back. So, I mean, because one of the things that we know is that the gap in women's voting is huge, and that's what's really making a lot of difference. I think in these midterm elections, if you get women out, and as is typically the case, all of the controversial legislation gets passed as quickly as possible. So they hope by the time of the midterms, people forget. Are we likely to see? Oh, it's not going to be Vagina Gate summer here, is it? I mean, it's going to be pretty tame.
I think
they're
going to try and get out of here as quickly as possible.
Yeah, that's my theory.
Get on the campaign trail. But when Mark Schauer chose Lisa Brown as his lieutenant governor pick,
Yeah.
clearly he wanted to keep that issue alive. And there still have been controversial issues like the abortion righter, the
So-called rape
petition
insurance.
drive,
Yeah.
right, that went through even without Governor Snyder's approval. So, and that was fairly recently. So I do think that some of these women's and social issues like gay marriage will still be there by the time November kicks around.
What is the polling showing so far on that? Are women still holding steadfast in the Dems camp for that? I mean, is it still resonating with women voters? Can we tell from the polling, or what we're seeing on it so far?
I have not seen specific questions lately on so-called war on women issues.
Yeah.
You do see that in the polls where Mark Schauer or Gary Peters running for Senate, when they're making strides, female voters are helping them.
We saw Terry Lynn Land come out with her first ad, Very odd ad, I thought again. And I mean, it's going to be apparently the era for strange
I
ads.
don't know who's
Strange
paying these
Yeah.
people.
Well, I mean, that is, you're absolutely right. Part of the challenge is that the various groups can support these ads, and some of the campaigns probably are going to cringe when they see some of the things that are going to come later, closer to the election. But this one features her talking about how there is no war on women, and
Well,
in
she didn't
her.
do a whole lot of talking. It's
Well, that's
mostly
true. It
water
was
drinking.
mostly being silent.
The
Um,
Marco Rubio strategy of water
is-
drinking.
oh, ouch! Look how
Sorry.
well that worked for him.
No
Yeah.
offense, man.
Well, it's going to be, that's another interesting race that's coming up here. Terry Lynn Land, I have seen her give a speech at the League of Women Voters, and she came across as very reasonable. She, at that time, was very much pushing for having early voting and Sunday voting and all sorts of expansions in the vote here in Michigan. I suspect those are not as popular with her as they once were, since it seems that the more and more you depress the vote, the better and better it is for the GOP nowadays. Michigan hasn't been at the forefront of some of the more spectacular efforts to suppress the vote, but maybe that's because we don't have much in the way of early voting and expanded voting anyhow.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, we have, some overseas absentee and senior, but we don't have no excuse absentee, and we don't have
Right.
any early, not absentee ballot early voting, no in-person early voting.
It seems strange that we didn't. I mean, that we didn't go along with a lot of the reforms that other states did. They're busy pulling them back if they can in GOP territory, but that's kind of strange.
Well, one thing I think for sure this race is going to be expensive.
Well,
There's going
there's
to be
that.
a fortune spent in Michigan between these two candidates.
Oh, absolutely. The outside spending in the
Outside.
Senate race is already, in 4 to 5 million, I think, on each side. And yeah, it's going to be a lot more coming up before the election. I'll just say about that Terry Lynn Land ad. It's gotten a lot of responses. Some people love it, some people hate it. It got people talking though, which I think is certainly one goal with an advertisement. Even Rick Snyder's scuba ad, certainly got a lot of attention. Whether or not it was the kind of attention he was looking for.
We forgot that already. That was
Yeah,
one of the
yeah,
oddest ads
sure.
anyone has
I mean,
ever seen.
his One Tough Nerd ad years
That was
ago
very
was
effective.
weird too, but it worked.
Hugely
It got-
effective.
yeah.
He picked a different color scheme. He picked blue and green for Michigan's waters and trees, and didn't go the red, white, and blue route and the one tough nerd idea. I thought that was quite a creative campaign. I didn't think that the Super Bowl ad with him in the pool was of the same caliber. I don't know if you can go back to that well again. We'll see, I guess.
It was the same company.
I
that
know,
produced
that's
it.
what
Yeah.
surprised me.
Mhm.
I guess everybody gets, well, I don't know. Either they have some sort of secret strategy I can't quite fathom, or they've lost their touch. I'm not sure which it's going to be.
Well, they're known for a lot of very splashy ads, and sometimes they're fantastic hits, and sometimes they do the Christine O'Donnell "I'm not a witch" ad out in
Yes.
Delaware. So you never know what you're going to end up with.
Was that splashy reference a scuba joke?
I wish
Oh.
I were that clever.
My favorite was the Carly Fiorina with the
The
strange
demon
sheep contest, costumes with the red eyes, the demon sheep ad. Yeah, that is a bizarre company. I guess you get what you pay for on those. Are social media and the internet going to play as much of a role this time? Is it an expanding role, or is TV still the dominant force?
It's certainly an expanded role. I mean, both, the gubernatorial campaigns, for instance, were on Facebook and Google before television.
Mhm.
That was the first place they hit. It's a much, smaller reach still. I mean, TV ads are still the dominant, TV is still the dominant advertising medium, and it's going to be this election cycle as well. But yeah, I mean, there's a lot going on with social media and behind the scenes. The GOP, I'm not exactly sure what it is, but came out with some new, get out the vote recruiting tool, some sort of an iPhone app or something like that.
When we look at
And
how
Lon
successful
Johnson
Obama was
yeah.
with his,
Mhm.
literally house by house organizing, where you'd walk up with an iPad and you could show a custom made ad to the person at the door. I mean, that was a huge
Mhm.
value to them. I mean, saw Bob Shrum the other day on TV arguing that maybe one of the reasons we're still seeing TV as the dominant medium is because you get a 15% agency fee for placing the ads, and a
That's
lot of
true.
consultants like that, and you don't get
Yes.
that same
Yeah.
kicker if you're the person putting the information on the internet.
But when
But-
does TV cease to be a valuable resource to use?
Well,
Because,
that's what we're going to see.
I mean,
Well, it depends how much the market share goes down before 2016. what you're starting to see, especially for, even state house races, is for not a lot of money, you can do micro targeting on
Yes.
people's cell phones and on certain websites, and really tailor your content to people, because so much of our information is out there. And I think as people become savvier, they'll realize that it's a pretty effective medium, and they probably save some money too.
Plus
And
people aren't
perhaps,
watching.
perhaps it'll just be annoying to all of us in a different way.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
people aren't watching, as many people aren't watching TV in a synchronous way. They're watching it asynchronous.
That's
Oh,
becoming
yeah.
a huge issue.
I mean,
for
I don't
local
watch ads
TV.
anymore.
Sure,
I
yeah.
watch TV.
Yeah, I write about political TV ads, but I don't actually watch TV. So.
Right, right.
Thank God for YouTube.
I
Yeah.
don't know how my TV works at home. That's up to my husband.
The younger you are, I mean, the students in my classes are not watching TV for their news. I mean, they're getting it all on the cell phone. And so they're the perfect candidates for micro-targeting. In an off-year race, they tend not to come out in as large a number. So maybe TV still works. But I'll tell you, the TV stations are desperate because as they are losing market share with young people in particular, and people are DVRing their way through the ads, they're finding it more and more difficult to survive. And so they're very dependent on that political advertising. It's a huge portion of their income. And I always felt that was a bit of, here's my biases showing through. When I ran for Congress in 2000 for the 8th District as a third party candidate for the Green Party, and it seemed that the rules were very much designed to make sure that third party candidates were only asked one question, which was, why are you a spoiler? Not your position on any of the issues, because it doesn't seem to me they're particularly eager to carve up that pie and expand it, especially to parties that don't provide much in the way of advertising dollars. So you tend not to be asked important questions. I think it's going to be very interesting to see in the next decade how local TV advertising in particular. I think the simple saturation problem is going to be huge this time. There's so much more money as a result of Supreme Court decisions flowing into these races that, I mean, many of them, there's no ad time left to buy. I mean, it's already locked up. I'm sure they'd cancel the shows if they couldn't just run ads. I mean, because they need that revenue. But I don't see how people their eyes are going to glaze over by November, aren't they? Isn't there a saturation
I would
point?
think so, especially when we have two very big races with the governor's race and U.S. Senate.
Yeah.
Not to mention some interesting House races now as well.
Were the Dems going to put any money into the 8th District this time?
If Tom McMillan wins, I think they will. He's a very conservative Republican, and he's in a race with former Senate Majority Leader Mike Bishop. They're both from Rochester. And I think the Democrats do see that he is a ripe target. If they're being honest, I don't think that they think the seat will flip, but they can certainly make Republicans spend some time and money on it.
Does the Tea Party candidate have a chance if they split the vote?
Are you talking about Tom
McMillan would
McMillan?
be the
I think
Tea
Tom
Party
McMillan has an excellent shot
Does he?
at winning the nomination. He's very determined. He has Justin Amash's endorsement. And the key for him will be if he attracts some of those national liberty and Tea Party groups and they start pouring in the money, because Mike Bishop has the institutional support with Mike Rogers and his machine.
This is LCC Radio, WLNZ 89.7 here in Lansing, Michigan. We're talking with Jonathon Oosting of MLive and also with Susan Demas of Inside Michigan Politics about some of the upcoming races this fall. Who's going to surface on the Dem side? Is it going to be Eric Schertzing that has the best chance of?
I would imagine so. Yeah, I think he has probably the best name recognition. It's limited still. I mean, I think you mentioned Bart Byram earlier, Virg Bernero. Either of those candidates would have entered the race in a much more advantageous position. So it's an uphill battle for a lot of Dems there. I don't think any of them are that well known outside of their local area.
Are they going to beat each other up along the way, or?
I'm not sure terribly effectively.
Lack of ammunition, or?
I think that Schertzing, by and large, is the most experienced candidate, and the Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee has already come out for him, which is somewhat unusual in a primary because he has really separated himself. So, short of some sort of disaster, I think he'll have a fairly easy time.
I would think that's going to be one of the more interesting races around. The other one that I'm kind of interested in is Attorney General Bill Schuette, because I hang out with a lot of the cannabis crowd, the medical marijuana people, who are not happy with Mr. Schuette. he went around the state after that ballot proposal went through and kind of worked with prosecutors and tried to urge them to continue to be aggressive in pursuing federal cases or to pursue local cases under federal law or use whatever they had that they could use. And I think the cannabis community is organized against him. I think there's been a lot of concern in the state, that the voters felt they came out for that issue. We don't have it on the ballot this time. I was thinking recreational marijuana might make it to the ballot. That would have certainly, I think, galvanized the Dems in the state, but that's not going to be on the ballot this fall. What are the ballot issues that are going to get people excited enough to come out?
Well, the minimum wage one will be interesting, assuming that makes the ballot. They're still collecting signatures for it, but
Is the new
seems like we've
GOP
got to do
proposal to take it up to $7.90?
It's 8:15.
I know.
actually.
Well, I figure somebody can cut it to
Yeah.
$7.90.
There you go.
It doesn't sound like Rick Jones' Senate bill has a lot of legs. I mean, Randy Richardville, came out and said he's not a fan of it. So I suspect that's not going to go anywhere. So
I would assume.
Don't we have a wolf ballot issue probably?
we got three
We
of
may
them.
have
Yeah,
three,
yeah,
but
yeah.
it all depends what the legislature does
Again.
because
Mhm.
we could see another end run.
Sure. Like the abortion rider bill, it's a citizen initiated bill by this group
Yes.
called Citizens for Professional Wildlife Management, which is a bunch of hunter groups. If the legislature decides to take it up and vote on it, it would effectively undermine the second anti-wolf hunting proposal
Right.
after they already undermined the first one. So
Right.
Those
Could
kinds of proposals, when you start getting multiples, tend to wash each other out to a
Right,
great degree.
which is obviously a strategy. And it
Exactly.
could be very effective for them.
Yeah. Now, do we know for sure who the wolf, the people that want wolf hunting banned, do we know for sure who they are?
Well, by and large, it's the National Humane Society that's been funding the initiative, but certainly there are a lot of local environmental type groups that have signed on.
Does it galvanize young people?
That's a good question. I haven't really paid attention to the demographics of the polling.
I don't hear my students talking about it.
No,
wonder-
because there are a lot of wolves down here,
Yeah.
obviously, so
Yeah.
that may have something to do with it.
yeah, it does seem it seems like a remote issue. I think for a lot of people.
Yeah, I wonder.
Something that is happening, but it was a small hunt this year. It actually wasn't
Didn't
that
have much
effective. Sure.
It's the
so-
trapping that worries me.
Sure, and the Humane Society and other groups are worried that will eventually happen. That wasn't part of the first time.
Right.
See, most of it takes place in the UP, all of it for hunting or for
Mhm.
wolves. So, I mean,
Is
how many
there-
people have actually seen a wolf outside a zoo? In Michigan,
Well,
1,000 people. I mean, not really very many.
yeah, well, they're elusive animals.
You don't see them.
Yeah, you
It's
don't
like
see them.
foxes.
I mean, they don't attack people. They
No.
would just as soon leave us alone. I had a friend who owned a wolf, full-blooded wolf in Flint. He had it in with his dogs in the backyard, and it was kind of cute to see the kids come over and say that they wanted to see, the dog in the backyard. And the other kids said, "No, man, that's a wolf." I don't care." So he wasn't quite as secretive about his wolf as he thought he was being. But there were, I did years ago a story on a farmer up by Everett, Michigan, who had difficulties with coyotes and so a lot of farmers are concerned about that issue. It might galvanize some of them. I don't know. Bill, you said you heard about a new initiative,
Oh, yeah, we were talking.
Right to Hunt?
It was in the newspaper over the weekend that numerous states are proposing right to hunt legislation, which would seemingly, we're already doing that anyway with the wolf thing in some ways,
Yeah.
but it would prohibit any legislation that restricted hunting as it exists. So you couldn't kind of lock something off and say we're not going to hunt them anymore.
That seems problematic when you have species that undergo ebbs and flows in population.
course.
But I mean, obviously, there's a very strong hunting community in this country.
Well, we just saw in Georgia, for example, this new sort of guns everywhere law. We haven't seen a gun law on the ballot in a long time, have we, here in the state? I mean, it seems gun legislation often gets people agitated. We don't seem to have that many divisive issues coming up this fall. The ballot's probably not going to determine the election this time. I mean, the ballot initiatives.
We don't appear to have that many this time.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's going to be a smaller batch. I mean, the minimum wage one, the goal with that is to turn out voters, right?
Right.
Which is the Dems' big hope for winning in a midterm election. Obviously, traditionally the Republicans control the off-year elections here, and so the hope is that would, fire up people. I'm not sure if that will end up happening. But
I took my happy-dappy little video camera the other day and went down to the Democratic headquarters in downtown Lansing and saw the press conference that they did about the governor's cousin and his furniture business, and they were hoping to turn that into a scandal that would really galvanize voters, arguing that the governor had favored his cousin's furniture business, and it had grown in how much the state contract was, even though budget-cutting Tea Party types had tried to prevent the budget from going up for equipment and furniture for schools. It didn't seem to gain much traction after that, and a reporter friend said they'd have been better off leaking it to a reporter, because a reporter would have owned it and would have carried it maybe longer.
well, as I understand, they did try, but
Oh, they
um,
didn't get a bite. Ah,
yeah,
okay.
yeah. I mean,
Well, that explains it.
sure. I wasn't around when that furniture contract took place, so I don't know exactly what happened. But the story from the Snyder administration is that things were essentially more complex than Dems would let on. It wasn't Tea Party types simply trying to limit spending. It would have only limited spending
New
on new
spending,
furniture.
right,
Wouldn't have limited spending on used furniture,
right.
and it would have
But that would have
essentially would have
eliminated his
boosted.
cousin's
Well,
contract.
not well. What's interesting is his cousin actually has a direct contract for used furniture.
Oh, he does.
Yeah.
But the way the line item was written was that it would prohibit spending on new furniture or for a used provider that also provides new furniture. So it would have essentially
One company
funneled
maybe.
all spending into the second company that also had a
That's
furniture
the kind of
contract.
complexity that does not lend itself to a good ad.
Well, that's if you care about the facts. If you just want to make
Ah,
if you just want to make it about cronyism and helping out
right.
your cousin, and it goes along with the nerd fund and
The nerd fund, I
corruption,
think, is, yeah.
you might be able to tie something together. I don't know if it'll resonate. Good government stuff tends not to be a big draw, but a lot of times it's hit or miss, and see what you can get. I mean, back in '06, nobody thought that the China ads against Dick DeVos would,
Right.
be so powerful.
Yeah.
But they turn out to be pretty decisive. So, everyone's always hoping to latch on to something like that.
Are the Koch brothers husbanding all their money and hoping to put it into these races in order to influence Michigan? Is Michigan on the radar of the big money at the national level? They've gone state level in a lot of cases now. Is Michigan a plum for them?
Well, the Senate race, they're already heavily invested
Heavily
in.
invested in?
I don't see them getting involved in a lot of other in
I've
state
seen the
level
Koch
races.
brothers were even starting to do things like put money into local school board races. I mean, they're down to micro targeting, so that's why I was wondering if we're going to see a big infusion of their cash in the state this year.
Haven't seen it yet.
Wouldn't
I mean,
take
outside
much
of the
money to
Senate
win a
race.
local school board race.
That's what they figured. It's a real bargain.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's that's you can get a lot of bang for your buck in those cases. Well, it's going to be a very interesting. I'm going to ask you one parting question. We're already looking forward to 2014, but what about 2016? What are your predictions for 2016? What are we going to see? What's going to be the big news for the 2016 election? Who do you think the two top ticket candidates will be?
Hillary against somebody.
That's the somebody I kind of.
Well, there
Sure.
certainly was a very strong ready for Hillary presence at the Jeff Jack dinner
Was
over the
there?
weekend.
Sure.
So
With
as
Bill
you would
Litter?
as
Yeah.
you would expect. And anything can happen. Obviously, she was the favorite last time in '08, and it didn't work out. So there's a long time before then.
Sure.
And as for the Republican side, nobody's really emerged. Obviously, Chris Christie had some support, but he's kind of dealing with his own scandals. We'll see if he can emerge.
Rand Paul is still in there. I mean, we're still seeing. I mean, we're even hearing things like Paul Ryan surfacing. It's going to be a very interesting race. I was interested to see whether Elizabeth Warren would break down and run. I actually ordered on Zazzle some bumper stickers that said Warren, and I was ordering bumper stickers for Warren 2016. The only problem was I hit a typo and I made them Warren 2014. I'd be just as happy if she'd run this year, but I don't know for what. So she already has a job for this part of the ticket, so could be an interesting race. What's your predictions for 2016, Bill? Who's going to be on the GOP side?
A Bush.
You think, Jim? He's sure testing the waters. And he's certainly making his more unpopular positions with the base evident now. I think to see whether he can survive that, I don't know.
I'm not sure if millennials will be very jazzed about another Clinton versus Bush race.
I can't believe they would be. I know. That's why I keep thinking Elizabeth Warren could sneak in there. and galvanize young people, but I don't know. We'll see. Well, thank you very much to Susan Demas of Inside Michigan Politics and Jonathon Oosting of MLI. We hope to have you back again periodically before the election, find out what's happening here in Michigan. Thank you very much.
Thank
Thank you.
you.
Good to see you. We're going to switch gears now and talk a bit about this is our fourth week and final week of Autism Month, and we are joined by our two guests here to talk about peer-to-peer counseling and some of the safety for all sorts of issues. So if you would do me a favor, because we had a whole clutch of people here and I'm not sure who I'm talking to, so I'm going to ask you to introduce yourself.
Sure. Good evening. My name is Sarah Winslow, and I'm from Ingham Intermediate School District.
Ann, great.
And I am Michelle Rosa, and I'm also from Ingham Intermediate School District.
And what's new with schools and autism? Apparently that would be your area of expertise.
Sure. We are here to talk tonight about a project called START, and it is the statewide autism resources and training project. It's funded by the Michigan Department of Ed and the Office of Special Education, and it's a project to provide training and technical assistance to educators in Michigan that serve students with autism spectrum disorders.
How many people students on the spectrum are in special classes and how many are mainstream? Do we have any idea of the numbers?
We don't have numbers, but that is the intent of the START grant, is to maximize collaboration between educators like speech and language pathologists and general education and special education teachers, parents, to maximize those opportunities for students in the general education setting. So I can say that the number of children in the general education setting has increased, and they're in the general education setting for longer periods of time. So the grant really pushes for inclusion and full inclusion from early childhood to, post-secondary programming.
We hear that the numbers are growing. Does that mean that we are seeing more kids coming into the system who are in need of special services?
Correct. And the focus of the START project has become systems level change, implemented by school staff and administrators willing to commit to using evidence-based practices in the areas of educational programming, professional development, parent professional collaboration, and service coordination. And one of those evidence-based practices is the peer-to-peer support program that we've been very diligent in trying to implement across many of our local districts. And our next group that would like to talk are actual implementers of a peer-to-peer program in one of our local high schools.
How does peer-to-peer work? In other words, it's kids helping kids.
Yes,
And
exactly.
so are they given training on how to help each other?
They are.
Okay.
They're
I see.
giving training at the school level. At the high school, it's a class for credit. It's an elective credit that the students who are in general education classes receive the credit to assist the students with autism spectrum disorder.
So are these kids with autism helping other kids with autism, or are these kids who are not on the spectrum helping kids with autism, or both?
Both. But
Aha.
typically,
All ways are good ways.
yes.
I see.
Typically, we have groups of students that are neurotypical. They don't have autism spectrum disorder, and they are recruited or volunteer to be part of these peer-to-peer support programs. If it's not at the high school level, they typically volunteer, and they receive training 1 to 2 times a month. And then they do a lot of problem solving in groups, either with the student on the spectrum or without the student, as to how can we fix this social struggle that the child is having, or how can we get the child to be part of our kickball game at recess, things like that, so that the child is fully integrated into all of the activities that their peers are doing.
Is this a demonstration project, or are you doing it statewide?
It's a statewide
Statewide.
project, absolutely
Now,
statewide.
why was the Ingham Intermediate School District chosen for that? I imagine there was competition, but what was your expertise that allowed you to get this grant?
Each area of the state, they're part of what START promotes are called RCNs, which are regional collaborative networks, and they're groups of counties together that are collaboratives that work together to promote these programs. And they each apply for the grant, and each RCN receives a sum of money from the statewide grant.
So you don't
to
do
support
it
these.
statewide. You do it in a
We don't do it
region.
statewide, correct. We are part of the
Regionally, yes.
Capital Region Autism Network, which is Eaton and Ingham counties
Okay.
together.
This is LCC Radio, WLNZ 89.7 here in Lansing. We're talking about this. You were talking about it being evidence-based. And when you're talking about social peer-to-peer support, what kinds of assessments do you use to tell whether it's working or not?
A lot of data is collected on how it improves the schooling for a typical student, and our next group can speak specifically to that. What we found at the elementary level is that students tend to have less behavioral issues when they're involved in peer-to-peer programs. It provides typical peers some leadership opportunities and teaching opportunities, and the students with autism spectrum disorder typically feel more included into the general education setting. They're not so isolated, so they have friendships that they possibly didn't have previously. And the data that we collect at the school level typically shows quite a decrease in behavioral concerns.
How do you choose the students who get to participate in the program?
At the elementary level, and they can speak to the high school level, the group following our discussion, they volunteer, and then we get parent permission so that their parents know that they're part of the group. So
For both sides?
both sides, yes.
Okay.
Yes. So both sides of the equation know what they're getting into and what the expectations are.
Huh.
Yeah.
Because we've seen more things like, I mean, I was part of the restorative justice movement,
Yes.
and there was a lot of,
Sure, sure.
locally based mediation, and
Mhm.
peer mediation became a huge thing that I think was very good for a lot of students, both the recipients of the intervention and also the people who administered
Yes.
it. And so is this building on that kind of model?
I haven't been part of the restorative justice, but yes, I mean, it's just decreasing the isolation of different groups of students and making sure we're having a conversation so that each side is understanding the other side.
Is there any, maybe not evidence, but any indication that it decreases bullying?
Well, they do have data. STAR collected, did some research in the 2012-2013 school year over 4 high schools in the state of Michigan, and they found that with the general ed link that it increased attendance over time, decreased office discipline referrals, and increased GPA over time from pre being a link and post being a link, which is pretty impressive data for those students.
Bullying has become such a huge issue, and I think our awareness of it has grown so much, but I don't know if our ability to cope with it has grown as quickly as our awareness has. It still seems to be a big issue in a lot of schools. What are the kinds of problems that kids on the spectrum still face from their peers? What are the kinds of concerns that they bring to these problem-solving groups?
Typically, the typical students are bringing problems that are surrounding play. My peer will not let us make decisions about the game we're playing on the playground. My peer with autism spectrum disorder wants the game to always be his way. So that can be really difficult in a play situation, but when you have a platform to discuss that and problem solve that, then that isolation or those peers don't leave that peer in the dust and ignore him. We problem solve it so that the relationship of playing can continue.
Well, that's true, because one of the hallmarks of the spectrum is wanting predictability and a routine, and so that would be it'd be very difficult to say let's do something different every time.
Right.
Let's see.
How long
Interesting.
has this program been underway?
14 years.
14 years.
Is there any
Wow.
post-tracking after school?
They're looking into that.
That is
It'd
something
be
that they're
interesting to
looking to
see what
start.
happens after
Yeah.
people leave the school format.
In
We're
fact,
playing chair now. That's
yes,
good.
playing
now.
musical chairs. And I'll let Maggie introduce herself, but she's an excellent example of the answer to your question.
I'm Maggie Whaley.
I'm Lisa Basor. I am an autism consultant with Ingham Intermediate School District.
And tell us, what about your experience with the program?
I started at Haslett High School in the peer-to-peer group that we have, and it developed into a links program, the class that they were talking about. And after that, I actually attended Lansing Community College and went back to the high school while I was in college to help them out. And now I'm in college at Grand Valley State University, and we have a links program there as well with students on the autism spectrum that attend college, and I'm a mentor for those individuals.
So you're taking your experience from that high school setting into Grand Valley now, and then
Yes.
still coming back and helping at the high school. Oh, wow,
Yeah.
that's a
Yep.
full circle kind of arrangement.
And it's great networking with everybody, all these different programs across the state and different families and different experiences. So it's been a really great experience for me.
How long has Grand Valley had a program like that?
This is they're going into their 3rd year.
Relatively new
It's
then.
very new, yes.
Does Michigan State have one?
They are developing, I hear
in the works.
rumors.
It's
yes.
in the works.
It's in the works.
Oh.
It's coming.
I'll have to get you to come in and start talking with us. in
Yeah,
our
that'd be
college.
great,
That would be
yeah.
great, yeah. And tell us about your role with the program.
Well, I coordinated and now run the program at Haslett High School. And we have this year, we started 3 years ago. 3 years ago, Maggie was one of our first. We have 64 links now, and we
Wow.
service about 12 students with special needs, primarily students with autism, but we've just started, the state has now expanded it where we can work with students with at all disability levels. And one of your questions was, which I got excited about back there, do the autistic kids sometimes mentor or link
Yeah.
with other autistic students? And we are going to have our first one next year. So one of my students who has Asperger's syndrome is going to link with a student who has Down syndrome next year, which will be great for him.
Oh.
It'll really help build his self-esteem, and help him with his confidence, I think. I'm really excited about
So
that.
this model works also for students with other disabilities such as Downs.
I
Oh,
think
this
that
is-
just has been maybe 1 year now
Huh.
that we've started that.
Are there, how does it adapt itself in the schools? Because I know that lots of times it's difficult to put new programs in schools.
Well, 3 years ago, Start really came to us and said, "Will you start this?" It was really a pilot program in our area, in the Ingham area, and I think they came to us in November and asked us to start in January. And so I was a little nervous because I didn't know what I was doing, but we just jumped in both feet and worked it out as it came along. As problems arose, we figured out what to do, and that's kind of the direction that we took.
The focus of
Learned
the
as we went.
program is primarily social, but I'm assuming it also has an impact on academics. Is that
Sure.
right? So we're expecting it that students who are doing better socially in school are achieving more. As we're seeing this transition to Common Core coming up, which has all of a sudden become controversial now, I'm wondering, is that going to be unsettling for kids on the spectrum to have to adjust to a new testing protocol, a new testing system? It seems like some teachers are still wondering how it's going to be implemented. Is this changing a lot for the environment?
Well, as far as as far as I'm concerned with the Links program, the peer modeling is what really makes it so successful. So what I've found is the students see their peers doing, they're going to adapt to that, and they'll work through what they need to. And we'll always have accommodations that we can put on their IEPs. If they need a different setting, if they need longer on the test, things like that. So those will always be available.
What's been the parents' reaction?
Oh, I mean, the parents of the students with special needs, I think, love it because they see humongous changes in their children. Socially, they're just, it really, behaviors decrease a lot. And then the students who are the neurotypical students or the links, I think their parents really love what it's doing for their kids. It just is, it helps with organization. It helps by helping another person. Megan can speak more to that.
Yeah, and I think too, just being included, the parents find that, even inside and outside of school, these peers want to hang out with the student with autism, which is just amazing. And they've had, so much fun getting to know each other and just really making genuine friendships. So it's been, I think, as far as I know, parents are loving it.
How did it change your life?
My life, well, I always knew that I wanted to go into special ed since I was little. But it really, really, I've made so many amazing friends through these programs, people that I, went to high school with and I still hang out with all the time. And now in college with, so unique, different people, getting to know and value people's differences.
Now, you say you have 64 students involved in the program now. What is the gender breakdown? Are they primarily female? Primarily male?
I would say probably we maybe have 35 female and 25.
Oh, so it's fairly evenly split.
Yeah, pretty
Are-
evenly split, I would say.
Are they mostly students who think about education or special ed as a career field, or what are the reasons that your peers get into this maybe?
Well, I know my brother's contemplating joining right now, and he just wants it because it's cool. It's cool to be a link, which is awesome. And I know a lot of people leave there contemplating special ed and looking into that, and it maybe not be the reason why they join, but it may be an outcome of the program.
How many hours a week does it require?
It's just one class a day, and then there's also outside stuff that a lot of them volunteer to do. with their link or with other people in the program.
So
I
this is-
have a meeting once a week that they're all required to come to. And that's really for training, or the roundtable meetings, which we have twice a month, where they come and we talk very specifically about each student. So one student with autism, all of his links will come to me, and it's called a roundtable meeting. We just talk about everything that has to do with that student and how they can support and things that we need to do differently, problems they're having, so that they can really learn to collaborate as a team to help that child. And consistency is really big for students with autism, so we want to make sure we're all doing and saying the same things.
It would be my guess that the teachers embrace this project then, right?
Yes, and has definitely. Mhm.
Now, is it
Lot of
similar statewide? I mean, do you get a feel for it, what's going on? Because this is a program that's running quietly statewide, I think,
Mhm.
which is nice.
Go ahead. I don't know exactly how many schools are doing it here we're gonna look it up, in Michigan, but it is definitely increasing in popularity. I'm surprised. I was home at my parents' house over Easter, and they have a links program there in Niles, Michigan, 2.5 hours south of here. So, and I think they're just starting, but I ran into a few people who, and that's what we started to talk about a little bit. But yeah, it's all over.
When I think of how grim it was for kids who had varying kinds of disability when I was young, and I think, Bill and I are both gray hairs here, and we remember the era where these kids really had nothing.
Yeah.
And we've seen such a spectacular change. And I guess what also really impresses me is that it seems Michigan is just really at the forefront.
Definitely.
I'm
Mhm.
stunned at, I mean,
Mhm.
every week we've had a new kind of, there's a new approach here. There's something that, working with police. Why is it that Michigan is is showing such leadership on this issue? Is it,
Well, for this one, I think it's Grand Valley.
Yeah.
is it?
Because they started the
Yes.
START project. Mm-hmm.
Oh, it originated
Yes.
with
Mhm.
faculty at Grand Valley
Right.
within the
Mhm.
Special College of Education there?
Yeah.
Ah, interesting.
It's
Ah.
interesting, especially since MSU's got a graduate school of education,
Oh,
it's #1 in the country.
Right,
Not
right,
to say they should have started it, but
right. But that's interesting.
I'm
I'm
surprised
just-
they
Yeah,
didn't.
Grand Valley has the autism center there that's where START is based, and
Wonderful.
That's
Yeah.
interesting to know.
it's
Wonderful.
wonderful.
It is. Well, I want to thank everybody. This has just been wonderful. Did you find out how many students? We're still looking it up. So we have one more person we haven't heard from. We have. We'll never be able to get her on camera on the webcast here. It's good to see everybody. And next week we're going to shift gears and we're going to start talking about Alzheimer's. And there's a sort of pairing there, I think. We're looking at young and old and how we're beginning to reach out and deal with people who have special needs in the community, and it's really kind of encouraging. So we're trying to devote the end of each show to learning a bit more about what's available in the community. I must admit that I was quite ignorant about all the wonderful programs that are available in Michigan here for the autism and Asperger's community, and it's great to see everybody. And I also wanted to thank our previous guests, Jonathon Oosting from MLive and Susan Demas from Inside Michigan Politics. We're going to be returning to the issue of politics as we come up on the 2014 election. We would like to urge people also to go to Lansing Online News, watch our webcast. You can also access past shows. We archive all of our webcasts there at the Lansing Online News website. And next week, we're going to be finishing up, I believe, with some more news about what's happening with the Historical Society of Greater Lansing. And Bill will by then be through with all of his poems that he has been doing. He's been doing his poem a day he'll be doing 30 days here in Michigan, for National Poetry Month. So I'm urging everybody to visit the website and read all of those poems. And we will be seeing everybody again here. This is Lansing Online News Radio here at LCC Radio, WLNZ 89.7 here in Lansing, Michigan, with Bonnie Bucqueroux and Bill Castanier. And we will see you back here next Monday night at 7 o'clock. Thank you very much.